What's going on, everyone? So this podcast is brought to you by the 6th Annual Joining Forces Conference held September 2nd and 3rd at DHR Conference Center in Edinburgh, Texas. This is brought to you and hosted by the Children's Advocacy Center of Hidalgo and Starr counties. You can register online at cachidalgo.org/events. All right, so we have three-time former Olympian Margaret Hoelzer on today's podcast. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have her on the podcast is because April is National Child Abuse Awareness Month. And our goal here at the CAC of Hidalgo and Starr counties is to get the word out to as many people as possible, especially during this month. So by sharing this podcast, you actually help us get the word out. So Margaret, can you share a little bit about yourself and how you got here?
Yeah. So I am Olympian, and I was sexually abused as a child and went public with that information in 2008 after the 2008 Olympics. I was abused from the ages of 5 to 7. Told my parents when I was 11. Went through the National Children's Advocacy Center. That's the advocacy center actually in my hometown in Huntsville, Alabama. It was the first advocacy center in the country. So I was really, really lucky that I had one actually at the time. I think it got its start in 1985, and I went through the advocacy center in 1994. And then years later, I think it was 2007, I came back and kind of, said, hey, I want to help, and what can I do? And there wasn't honestly a whole lot at that point. And then 2008, I decided to go public with my story and, connected with them and became their national spokesperson, and the rest was history.
So how was it going through the first CAC ever?
It was fantastic. It really was. At the time, obviously, when you've just been sexually abused and you've just told somebody, it's a really scary process, and they do a really fantastic job of making a traumatic situation not scary and not traumatic. So they like I said, it's a scary thing, and they do a really wonderful job of just, for lack of a better word, making it normal and making you feel safe and secure, and making everything go back to normal as best as it can, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. I think we have to tip our hats to the folks at the CACs. I can imagine what they go through. I hear a few stories, and they're bombarded by these stories all the time. It's pretty insane.
Absolutely. No, the statistics are staggering. I mean, it happens 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys. It happens a lot. Absolutely.
So when we were talking the other day on the phone, we as the CAC were trying to move away from the word victim as opposed to survivor, but you had different thoughts on that. Can you tell us your thought process on that?
Well, I think it depends on the circumstances. I personally have never had a problem with the word victim. I use the word victim and survivor interchangeably. And the main reason for that is I think there's been a stigma around the word victim. And I think the reason I don't have a problem with it is I look at it as that I was victimized, and there's nothing wrong with that. This was out of my control, and I certainly didn't ask for it. And so saying that I was a victim, I don't have a problem with that, because, it's just a word, and it is factual. It is something that happens. Secondly, I think the word survivor is a very, very empowering word. And I think if you just automatically slap that on anyone, it sort of decreases its value and its power. And so I think going from a process of victim to survivor is a very empowering process. And I absolutely think that anyone can become a survivor. But I think you have to, it takes some time, and it takes a little bit of work. And more importantly, you have to make that decision. You have to decide that you want to be a survivor. And I think that process is just, it's putting in the time, it's putting in the work. Honestly, I think the most important thing is just the decision and saying that you're going to take your life back, and that you're going to work on the process of healing. It's not necessarily that you have to quote unquote be healed, because I don't think you ever are technically healed. I think it's always a healing process. It's something you're always going through, but I think it's just that you're going to be working on it, and you're not going to live in this victim mentality. But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that, yes, I was a victim. That's fine, because you were, and that doesn't make you any less empowered by acknowledging that. I think it's actually powerful to acknowledge the fact that something was taken out of your control, and that's okay.
And you're absolutely right, because I think the goal of this podcast and other podcasts and getting information out is to give people tools, because obviously there's a lot of other people that are going through the same thing, but hearing somebody that actually went through it will give them enough guts to come forward and to be able to share their story. Obviously, if they've been sheltered in and they have nobody to talk to. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I 100% telling their story is so important. I always tell people to be a squeaky wheel. I was very, very lucky in the fact that the first two people I told my 11-year-old friend. Again, being in Huntsville, Alabama, we had sexual abuse education in schools. So having sexual abuse education in schools is so important. I told my 11-year-old friend was the first person, and she knew what it was. She recognized it and said, Margaret, you were molested. Obviously that's not a word in your everyday 11-year-old's vocabulary. So first of all, that's a huge deal. But she believed me, and then she understood and recognized it and said, you need to tell your parents. Which was basically, you need to tell a trusted adult. And then I went home that day and I told my mom, and my mom believed me. And so I was very, very lucky that the first two people I told believed me. Unfortunately, that's not very common, and that's not often the case. A lot of people tell and they're not believed the first time. And so, I can't reiterate enough. Just like I said, being that squeaky wheel, tell. If you have to tell 85 people, tell 85 people. I wish that everybody would be as lucky as I was, and that the first two people they would tell would believe them. But sometimes you just have to keep telling, because there are people that will believe you, and there are people that will listen and that will help you. There's people that want to help you. But unfortunately, sometimes you just have to, keep telling it a couple more times until you find that person that's going to listen. What
was going through your head right before, you were about to take this new journey?
I honestly don't remember. I know as an 11-year-old, I was at that age where we had just started, talking about boys, and I, starting to be interested in boys. And my friend and I were going through for a walk in the neighborhood. And like I said, I think we were talking about our little fourth grade crushes. And for whatever reason, that connection about talking about whoever we liked in our fourth grade class is kind of what the connection was. And somehow that relationship made me want to bring it up and made me want to talk about it. But also, we had just had that sexual abuse education in school a couple weeks before, and I had gotten really, really uncomfortable in class. We had watched a series of videos, and watching the videos, I'd gotten really uncomfortable in class. And so even though that didn't prompt the disclosure immediately, and I didn't 100% connect the dots watching that, I think it had been kind of, sitting in the back of my brain, kind of tumbling around back there. And I absolutely think that prompted, the discussion with my friend, because I think something was firing back there, even if I wasn't completely aware of it.
Interesting. I had author Penny Salmon, who's the author of Brave and Unbroken, and we were talking about during this time, especially during the COVID-19 coronavirus, everybody's quarantined, and we're actually going to see numbers of child abuse going up. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, she's absolutely right. Right now the circumstances, unfortunately, are perfect for child abuse. I actually did a talk several years ago, right after the Gulf oil spill, And statistically, whenever there's a natural disaster or like the economy kind of crashes, the rates of sexual abuse, sexual violence go up. And it has to do with, people losing their jobs, being home when they wouldn't normally be, turning to drugs and alcohol, and having general anxiety and depression, that kind of thing. And so all of that is happening right now, right? You have kids at home, you have adults at home that wouldn't necessarily be, people are losing their jobs. Obviously there's going to be anxiety and depression around that. People might be turning to drugs and alcohol to cope with that. There's people stressed out, obviously, because of the disease itself, and then, just the whole run the gamut of emotions. And then, just like I said, the economy with everything, people don't know how long this is going to last. So I would say absolutely the rates are going to go up. Then you have the healthcare workers on the front lines. A lot of those people and people that are considered essential workers that are still working, they might have their kids in school or staying in a daycare, and a lot of those, obviously those places are closed now. And so, they might be leaving their kids with babysitters or with neighbors that they don't know that well. And maybe they had, vetted the daycare, and they felt confident that that place was safe, but now all of a sudden they had to kind of quickly find somebody to watch their kid because they're working in a hospital. So, there's definitely, I think, a lot of situations that people were put in that weren't necessarily planned or aren't necessarily the situation they originally had. So absolutely the rates are going to go up.
It's a very interesting time that everybody's going through. I know over here in Hidalgo County is like when I was trying to reach out to elected officials, it's kind of like, well, everybody's kind of scrambling to figure out what to do, how to do it, how to be safe, how to keep our kids safe. It's a very interesting time right now. But let's talk about social triggers that people can identify right now, because what I've always understood is that there's a lot of people that have a thought about child abuse is happening in their home, but they never say anything. They always think something. So what are some social triggers that people can identify?
I think first of all, if you ever suspect something, if you ever think something is happening, you want to report it. You don't have to have evidence that something is happening in order to report something. I think there's this misconception that you're going to walk into the room and you're going to see something happening. And the reality is that that's just never going to happen. You're never going to walk in and see a child getting raped or just something happening. The odds of that happening are just practically non-existent. So it's going to be a feeling. It's going to be a gut feeling that something is just not right. And I can't really explain it any better than that, but it's like I said, it's kind of those little red flags that go off in your brain that just say something doesn't feel right. And maybe you can't put your finger on what doesn't feel right, but it's just something in your gut just doesn't sit well, and you don't feel right about something. And you can always report on that. And that's kind of what you have to do. If you have a disclosure, obviously, if a child comes to you and discloses something, that's going to be the easiest scenario in my mind to report, because then you obviously have an example of somebody telling you, hey, this happened to me. Kids don't make this stuff up. They don't lie. They don't watch TV shows and hear things. That just doesn't happen. If a kid comes to you and says, this happened to me, you need to take them at their word, and you absolutely need to report. I think it's a lot harder for people when they have that gut feeling and they're trying to kind of rationalize their way through that. And that's kind of where, like I said, if you've got that gut feeling and something doesn't feel right, you can absolutely report on that. You don't have to have quote unquote hard evidence.
So the CAC of Hidalgo and Starr counties is hosting our 6th annual Joining Forces Conference, September 2nd and 3rd, and you are our guest speaker. So we're super happy to have you on board. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role with our conference?
Yeah, I'm so excited to be coming. I've been a speaker for 12 years now, and I speak all over the country at conferences and fundraisers, and I'm so honored and delighted to be coming down and just sharing a little bit of my story, and just really telling about kind of my story of going through a CAC and what that was like, and overcoming abuse, and going on to become an Olympian. But yeah, that's pretty much it. But I'm just, like I said, so excited to be coming down and seeing the CAC and everybody there.
We're glad to have you on board. So this is from my personal thoughts. All right. So how does it feel to represent the United States of America in the Olympics? I mean, that has to be such a freaking awesome thing.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. It was a lot of fun. It was definitely a really neat.
What was your best and your worst memories of the Olympics?
Oh, wow. Gosh, best memories. I mean, there's so many. It's just such an honor representing your country, and like I said, gosh, that's hard to pinpoint. I would say probably the best thing would have had to have been standing on the medal podium. And I was really, really lucky. I didn't win a gold medal. I won 2 silvers and a bronze, but for my bronze medal, another American won the gold medal. And so I still got to hear the anthem and see the flag raised.
That's
so
awesome.
That was still really, really special.
So Margaret, once again, we'd like to thank you very much for your time. I know obviously this time that we're going through is a little iffy and it's a little uncertain for a lot of people. So hearing your story during Child Abuse Awareness Month is really, it's really refreshing, because it gives a lot of people hope. It gives a lot of people answers, and a lot of people can associate with this if they're going through this. So I commend you very much for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Margaret, we'll talk to you soon, and we'll see you at the 6th Annual Joining Forces Conference. All right, everyone, if you like what you heard, please share our page. We're trying to get the word out about Child Abuse Awareness Month this whole month long to as many people as possible. So sharing our page will help us get the word out. See y'all later.